My name is Elizabeth. I'm 97 years old, and I still wake up in my own bed, make my own tea, and decide how my day will go. People like to call that independent. I don't use that word much myself. It sounds like a badge you earn. For me, it was a series of refusals. At this age, everyone wants to know the secret, what vitamins I take, what routine I follow, what rule I never broke. They lean in, hopeful, as if I might hand them a map. I don't have a map. I just know what I refuse to do, even when it would have been easier. I refuse to rush my life to match other people's clocks. That began early. I was born when women were expected to fit neatly into small spaces, be agreeable, be useful, be quiet about wanting more. I learned quickly how much pressure there was to live life on schedule. Marry by this age. Have children by that age. Slow down when others said it was time. I didn't rebel loudly. I simply paused when I needed to. I married later than most, not because I was afraid, but because I hadn't met a man who felt like home instead of obligation. People worried about me. They always do when you don't move fast enough for their comfort. I refused to marry out of fear of being alone. That refusal shaped everything that came after. When I did marry, it was steady, ordinary, kind. No grand declarations. Just two people who knew how to sit in the same room without filling the silence. I learned early that independence doesn't come from strength alone. It comes from choosing carefully. I refused to hand over my thinking to louder voices. There were many of them, relatives, neighbors, experts, strangers with strong opinions. Everyone wants to tell an old woman what she should be doing, even when she was young. I listened politely. Then I decided for myself. I worked when I wanted to, stopped when I didn't. I saved slowly, spent modestly. I never chased a lifestyle that required constant maintenance. That was another refusal. Big houses, big commitments, big appearances. They look impressive when you're young. They become heavy when you're old. I chose small, manageable things. A home I could clean myself. Possessions I could lift. People called that limiting. I called it practical. I refused to confuse pride with independence. That one matters. There were times I needed help. Illness, loss. Moments when grief sat too heavily to carry alone. I accepted help then, gratefully. Independence isn't pretending you don't need anyone. It's choosing not to disappear inside someone else's decisions. I kept my routine simple, not rigid, simple. Wake up. Move my body gently. Eat food that still looks like food. I refused to stop being curious, even when people spoke slowly to me, even when they assumed confusion. I read. I asked questions. I learned new things badly and without embarrassment. Shame ages you faster than time. I refuse to let other people shrink my world. After a certain age, People start speaking about you in the past tense, as if your useful years are behind you. I corrected them gently. Sometimes I didn't correct them at all and simply lived differently. I traveled less as I got older, but I paid closer attention to what was near. Trees, neighbors, the way seasons announce themselves quietly. I refused to become invisible to myself. That sounds strange, but it happens easily. You stop caring how you feel, what you think, what you want. I kept asking those questions, not loudly, just honestly. I dressed for comfort, yes, but also for dignity. I brushed my hair even when no one was coming over. Those are small refusals. They add up. I refused to live in constant fear of falling, failing, or dying. Caution has its place. So does courage. I move carefully, not timidly. There's a difference. I noticed that many people my age surrendered long before their bodies demanded it. They handed over their authority piece by piece. First their schedule, then their opinions, then their decisions. I watched and took note. I refused to stop deciding. Even now at 97, I choose what to eat, when to rest, what brings me quiet joy. Independence didn't arrive all at once. It was built through a lifetime of saying no to things that would have made my life smaller. I don't judge those who chose differently. We all survive the best way we know how. This is just what kept me standing. And there's more to it, much more. But it starts here, with the things I refuse to give up when it would have been easier to let them go. As I grew older, the refusals became quieter, but more important. No one argues with you much at 97. They assume you've already made up your mind, or that it no longer matters. Both assumptions are wrong. What changes is not your need to choose, but the pressure applied to you. It becomes softer, more disguised. People start offering help that feels generous on the surface, but heavy underneath. They don't mean harm. They're afraid. Fear makes people controlling in gentle ways. I refuse to let fear make my decisions for me. When friends began moving into assisted living, I visited them. Some were relieved. Some were smaller somehow, even when their rooms were larger than my house. They had schedules posted on the walls, meal times, activity times, bed times. It looked efficient. It also looked like surrender. I told myself I would stay where I was as long as I could still recognize my mornings. That became one of my rules. I refused to outsource my days. People asked me if I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was alone long before I was old. I lost my husband years ago. I lost friends slowly, one funeral at a time. Loneliness didn't begin with age. It began with loss. But I learned the difference between being alone and being erased. I filled my time carefully, not with noise, but with meaning. I cooked even when it took longer. I folded my own laundry even when my hands shook. Each small effort was a quiet vote for myself. I refuse to let convenience replace participation. That one is dangerous. Convenience tells you it's helping, while it slowly removes you from your own life. One delivery, one service, one don't worry about it at a time. I accepted help when I truly needed it, but I kept doing what I could, even when it was slower and imperfect, especially then. I refused to talk myself out of effort just because effort became visible. When I walked more slowly, I didn't stop walking. When my memory stumbled, I didn't stop thinking. I wrote things down. I laughed at myself. I refused to be embarrassed by aging. Embarrassment is another thing that steals independence early. I watched people my age apologize for existing, for taking time, for needing space. I stopped apologizing. I said thank you instead. That small shift changes how the world treats you. I also refuse to live entirely in the past. That surprises people. They expect an old woman to talk only about what was, about loss, about nostalgia. I remember the past, yes, but I didn't move into it. I learned new recipes, new words, new ways of doing old things. I was bad at some of them. That didn't stop me. Being bad at something keeps you flexible. I refuse to freeze my identity at the age people found most comfortable. There's a moment, usually somewhere in your 70s or 80s, when people stop asking your opinion and start explaining things to you. They speak louder, slower. I let them finish. Then I spoke normally. I refused to shrink my voice to match their expectations. I also refused to live in constant preparation for death. That one confuses people. Of course I know I will die. I've known that for a very long time. But I didn't turn my life into a waiting room. I didn't sit around organizing my belongings as if that were living. I didn't talk only about doctors and diagnoses. I planned small things, a lunch, a visit, a book I hadn't read yet. Plans keep you upright. I refused to treat each day like a goodbye. Instead, I treated it like a day. Some were good, some were dull, some were hard. All were mine. I also refused to harden. That one took effort. Loss can make you brittle if you let it, suspicious, closed. I watched that happen to people I loved. I chose softness instead, not weakness, softness. I cried when I needed to. I forgave more than I held grudges. I let people disappoint me without turning them into villains. That kept my heart usable. Independence isn't just physical, it's emotional. I refuse to let bitterness make my decisions. There were times my body betrayed me, illnesses, falls, scares that lingered longer than they should have. Each time someone suggested it might be time to give up more control. Each time I asked a simple question: can I still decide for myself? As long as the answer was yes, I stayed. I made adjustments instead of exits, a railing here, a chair there. Independence adapts. It doesn't pretend. I refuse to romanticize my age. Being 97 is not poetic. It's practical. You wake up stiff. You forget words. You get tired faster than you expect. I didn't dress that up into wisdom. I just dealt with it. I rested when I needed to, moved when I could. I refused to measure my life against younger bodies. Comparison is another quiet thief. I also refuse to let my world get too small. Even when my radius shrank, my attention didn't. I noticed people, asked questions, remembered names. I treated the cashier, the neighbor, the nurse as if they mattered, because they did. Being seen keeps you engaged. Being engaged keeps you alive. I refuse to stop contributing. Contribution doesn't have to be grand. I listened. I encouraged. I told the truth gently when it was asked for. People still come to me sometimes, not because I have answers, but because I don't rush them. That is a form of independence too, the ability to be still without disappearing. I didn't chase youth. I didn't fight age. I refused both extremes. I accepted where I was, and I stayed active within it. That balance took a lifetime to learn. People think independence is about control. It's not. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for your choices, your habits, your tone. I took responsibility for my days, even when they were limited, especially then. And I'm still doing that now. I still decide when I wake up, what I wear, who I let into my hours. That is not an accident. It's the result of everything I refused to surrender when surrender would have been simpler. There is still more to say, more that matters, but it carries into the last part, the things I refused to believe, even when everyone around me did. There are beliefs people begin handing you when you get old. They don't announce them. They slip them into conversations, suggestions, worried looks. I refused many of those too. I refused to believe that aging means becoming less yourself. People speak as if age erases identity, as if the years peel you down until there's nothing left but fragility. That was never true for me. I am more myself now than I was at 40, less eager to please, less willing to explain. Age didn't take myself away, it returned it. I refuse to believe that usefulness ends when productivity does. That one is cruel. Our world is obsessed with output, with results you can count. When I stopped working, people asked what I did all day, as if being alive required justification. I refused that framing. I listened. I paid attention. I noticed things others rushed past. Presence has value, even if it doesn't show up on a ledger. I refuse to believe that dependence is inevitable and independence is denial. There's a difference between help and helplessness. I never pretended I didn't need anyone. I simply refused to hand over my agency prematurely. People sometimes confuse planning with panic. I planned, I adapted, I chose. That is not denial. That is respect for myself. I refuse to believe that old age must be filled with fear. Fear of falling, fear of forgetting, fear of dying. Fear narrows you. I acknowledged risks, yes, but I didn't let them become my personality. I still cooked with knives, still walked outside, still lived in a body that could fail, but hadn't yet. Living carefully is not the same as living afraid. I refused to believe that my opinions were outdated simply because they were old. Experience doesn't expire, it deepens. I learned to speak when my voice would help and stay quiet when it wouldn't. That discernment came with time. I didn't chase relevance, I offered honesty. People underestimate how much that's needed. I refused to believe that my best days were behind me. They were different, not lesser. Some of my richest moments happened late. A conversation that went nowhere but felt full. A morning without obligation. A laugh that came easily. When you stop chasing milestones, moments become enough. I refuse to believe that grief should harden me. I lost many people, more than I can count without stopping. Each loss carved space in me. I chose to let that space hold tenderness instead of resentment. Grief doesn't demand bitterness. That's a choice. I refuse to believe that independence meant isolation. That's another misunderstanding. I stayed connected, but selectively. I chose relationships that allowed me to remain myself, not ones that required shrinking or performing. Independence thrives in mutual respect. I refuse to believe that slowing down meant giving up. Slowness taught me precision. I no longer rush through feelings or decisions. I let things take the time they required. Haste is a young person's habit. Depth belongs to those who wait. I refuse to believe that my body defined my worth. Bodies change, they always have. I treated mine with patience instead of disappointment. I thanked it for what it still allowed me to do. I forgave it for what it could no longer manage. That kindness mattered. I refused to believe that the world had nothing left to teach me. Curiosity kept me alive. I asked younger people about their lives, listened without correcting. I learned new ways of seeing things. Staying teachable is a form of independence, too. I refused to believe that death made life pointless. Knowing the end exists sharpened my attention. I stopped postponing small pleasures, a good cup of tea, a conversation that lingered. Mortality didn't drain meaning from my days, it distilled it. I refused to believe that independence had to look impressive. No medals, no declarations, just quiet consistency. I made my bed, I chose my clothes, I decided how I would spend my energy, day after day. That is how it's maintained. I refused to believe that asking for help meant failure. I asked when I needed it. I declined when I didn't. Both were acts of choice. I refuse to believe that aging is a tragedy. It's not a reward either. It's a process, one that reveals who you are when all the noise falls away. At 97, I see people more clearly, including myself. I see how many rules I lived by that were never mine, how much freedom came from letting them go. Independence was not something I fought for at the end. It was something I practiced all along. In how I thought, in how I decided, in what I refused to surrender too early. People sometimes ask if I'm proud of making it this far. Pride isn't the word. I'm grateful. Grateful I listened to myself when it was inconvenient. Grateful I didn't confuse ease with wisdom. Grateful I stayed present in my own life. If there's anything I would pass along, it's not advice, it's permission. Permission to choose slower, to choose smaller, to choose yourself quietly. Independence doesn't shout, it whispers day after day. This is still your life. And at 97, I can say that it still is. Not perfect, not effortless, but mine. And that has made all the difference. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.